Analysis of the wine tasting form.
To facilitate the tasting of the wine, it is better to rely on a form that will help you to identify all the features that you need to research and analyze in a certain wine. The Wine Notary created a specific and complete form of its instruction to help tasters to taste every possible wine. All the rating scales have a range of 5 points that should be analyzed individually, because if for some features 5 represents the maximum value, in some other cases 5 might be a flaw, and so on. To understand how to fill the form, just a little common sense is required.
Identity data.
At the top of the form, there is a section for entries and personal information and identification data of the taster, such as name, date of tasting, the type of wine, for example, if it is white and red, and so on, as well as the name of the wine. It is always better to be as precise as possible during the compilation for an easy storage and possible future research. But now we are entering to the heart of the Wine Notary form.
Visual analysis.
After pouring a bit of wine into a glass suitable for a wine tasting, filling no more than 1/3 of it, you can approach the first stage of your analysis.
Color tones.
For every kind of wine, there are various color tones to help to identify. For a precise description of the color, the wines are divided into only 3 primary categories, which are white wines, rosé wines, and red wines. By convention, for centuries, the colors to define a wine are the hues reported in a wine tasting terminology list. Let's analyze what are the different shades of each wine considering the numerical value assigned to each color gradation.
Color hues. White wine. Value 1. Paper white. Value 2. Pale yellow. Value 3. Straw yellow. Value 4. Golden yellow. Value 5. Amber yellow. Rosé wine. Value 1. Pale pink. Value 2. Weak cherry pink. Value 3. Full cherry pink. Value 4. Claret pink. Value 5. Onion pink. Red wine. Value 1. Violet red. Value 2. Purple red. Value 3. Ruby red. Value 4. Garnet red. Value 5. Orange red.
The color of a wine should be analyzed by tilting the glass at 45 degrees over a white and well-lit background to be able to clearly recognize also the shades, which are often different from the basic color. The tone and the shades is recognizable where the wine makes the angle, and it's not essential to report it on the form.
Transparency.
Each wine can be more or less cloudy, so if the wine will be particularly transparent, the value to assign is 5. If it is too much veiled with thick consistency, the value is 1. Neither of the two extreme values are necessarily a flaw. To evaluate the transparency of a wine, you should observe it in front of a light source.
Density.
The density of a wine should be analyzed by swirling the glass and then wait for the formation of some tears on the edges. The slower the descent of the tears and the more dense they are, the greater the alcohol evaporation. Alcohol is the most volatile substance present in the wine. In fact, the amount of alcohol determines the density of a wine. If the descent of the tears from the edges is low and they appear very close to each other, it means that the wine tends to viscosity and the value is 5. If the descent is quick and the wine is extremely fluid, the value is 1. Neither extremes are flows.
Pelage.
For sparkling wines, it is important to evaluate their mousse or perlage, ignoring the analysis of the density. To evaluate the perlage, you should consider an average of fine bubbles, their quantity and the duration within the glass. If the bubbles are scarce and not visible, the value to be assigned is 1. If they look too generous and very swollen just like soda, the value is 5. Both extreme values represent a flow.
Olfactory analysis.
The olfactory analysis is surely the most complex one, and considerable experience is required for a successful result. Also, a certain well-being of the respiratory tract is needed. For a successful analysis, you need to build up in your mind a real olfactory memory, a real archive in which you can store all the scents of everything you have smelled during your life and what you will smell in the future, from the most meaningful scents to the everyday and unusual smells. Therefore, it is also important to get used to smelling everything that surrounds you much more than you usually do, because a correct analysis means learning to unpack the olfactory blend of aromas of any wine, to try to individually identify all the nuances of its volatile components. This analysis is certainly the most poetic stage of the tasting, where the wine taster seems to read a fairy tale seemingly suggested just by their imagination. But it's not really true. The grapes go through 3 phases of transformation, which are the growth on the plant, when the must becomes wine, and when the wine evolves and ages. These naturally produce various substances. The same substances are also present in everything that surrounds us, and they have the same chemical composition of the volatile substances which are described by the taster when he detects the scents of each wine. To make few examples, if during the fermentation of a wine it forms anhydric benzaldehyde, you can clearly smell a scent of cherry. However, it could also form phenyl acetate or geraniol, and the wine gets a deep scent of roses. Certainly, these terms have a very little poetic impact, and perhaps they would be more useful to a chemist. So it is pretty useless to learn them, and better to continue to use more practical words to analyze the scents through our actual olfactory memory, using the words like cherry, roses, and so on. To search for scents, it is better not to inhale for more than 3 seconds at a time, and do many thoughtful pauses, otherwise the alcohol may temporarily inhibit the nostrils. I will show you now how to do it correctly.
Impact.
The impact is the olfactory intensity that the wine offers. If the impact is strong, the value to be assigned is 5, but if the smell of the wine is almost imperceptible, the value is definitely 1. Wines produced from aromatic grape varieties such as Muscat, Gewürztraminer, Brachetto, Malvasia, they always have the maximum impact value of 5. The extreme lower value must be considered a flow.
Refinement.
The refinement indicates how the smell of a wine represents the range of its organoleptic quality, in which the best is value 5. The extreme lower value must be considered as a flow.
Completeness.
The word explains its meaning clearly. If the aroma of a wine is full with a very broad bouquet of scents, the value is 5. If the scent is extremely scarce in variety and quality, the value is 1. The extreme lower value is a flow.
Nature of the scents.
The scents of a wine should be divided into 3 classes: primary, secondary, and tertiary.
Primary.
The proper hints of the grapes used to produce the wine.
Secondary.
The scents formed during the must fermentation.
Tertiary.
The scents produced by the oxidative phase during the aging of the wine, but they can also be induced by contact with external materials, such as the wood of the toasted barrels. When searching for scents, it's preferable to report them separately depending on their category, in order to get used to distinguishing their nature.
Analysis of taste.
After an accurate olfactory analysis, you can move on to the taste analysis. For a correct perception of taste, it is important to prepare the mouth. At first taking a little sip, and then keeping a second sip in the mouth for longer, making it rotate all over the palate, and subsequently taking air to mouth to release the volatile substances. During this analysis, we can perceive the tactile sensations given by the wine, which are astringency, tingling, hot and burning sensation, temperature, texture, softness.
Impact.
Very similar to the olfactory impact, the taste impact indicates the perception intensity that the wine can offer. If the impact is strong, the value to be assigned is 5, and if the taste of the wine is not noticeable, the value is 1. The extreme lower value is considered a flow.
Refinement.
Just like the olfactory refinement, this feature indicates the actual quality level perceptible, in which the best is represented by the value 5. The extreme lower value represents a flow.
Persistence.
The persistent is the extended finish of a wine. In fact, it indicates how long the taste of the wine is still clearly perceptible after swallowing. Normally, the persistent time can vary from 5 to about 40 seconds. The extreme lower value is considered the flow.
Aftertaste.
The aftertaste of a wine is very important because it is the longest sensation that we perceive. It is closely tied to the persistence, but its judgment indicates its quality. If a wine offers flawless smell and taste, however, it might reveal a bitter aftertaste that will make it unpleasant. The perception of the aftertaste can have a duration range from 5 to 40 seconds. The lower value represents a flow.
Sensory analysis.
After analyzing the taste, we move on to analyzing other details such as the tactile taste sensations that the wine procures. In this case, the use of the tongue and the palate become the main tools. The tongue in particular works with its perceptual areas that are well demarcated: the tip for sweet, the edges for the acidic, the center for the salty, and the bottom for the bitter. It greatly helps to identify the organoleptic features such as sweetness, savoury, and acidity. For other features such as astringency, texture, softness, and hot and burn sensation due to alcohol, the main tool to use is the palate.
Sweetness.
The sweetness indicates the amount of residual sugar in a wine, not technically but in a sensory way. If a wine is definitely dry, the value is 1, and if it's far too sweet, the value to be assigned is 5. The extreme higher value is definitely a flow.
Softness.
The softness is determined by the glycerids formed inside the grapes during ripening, and for red wines and fine whites also during the malolactic fermentation. It is a tactile sensation, generally extremely pleasant even when it is very perceptible and the wine is so velvety to deserve a value of 5. The total absence of softness instead requires a value of 1. The extreme lower value represents the deficiency but not really a flow.
Alcohol perceived.
The alcohol content in wine causes hot and burning sensations in the mouth, and it is easier to perceive for unbalanced wines of low-level taste impact, as their organoleptic deficiencies are easily overlapped by the perception of alcohol. Wines with a low alcohol content, mainly the sweet wines where fermentation has been stuck, they have a value of 1 or 2, and the value to assign to fortified wines is 5. For all other categories instead, a score of 1 or 5 would represent a flow. For these differences, we can therefore say that both extremes' value do not necessarily represent a flow.
Acidity.
For every wine to be enjoyable, they must offer indeed a certain freshness to induce salivation and make mouth-watering the foods that are going to be paired. Many wines are deliberately acidic, corresponding to the value 1. Some others, such as too aged wines and poor quality wines, may taste flat and the value to be assigned is 5. The extreme highest score is a flow.
Savoury.
In all wines, there are many minerals that the soil has transmitted to the grapes through photosynthesis. For this reason, some vines grown on special soils such as volcanic or sandy and other types of soil rich in minerals give the wine a very pronounced flavor. Mineral hints are quite noticeable even by the nose, but the tactile sensation generated in mouth is the savoury flavor. If a wine is so bland to feel a real lack of mineral hints, the value to be assigned is 1. If it is too tasty or even salty, the score to be assigned is 5. Both extreme values represent a flow.
Tannin, only for red wines.
This feature must be considered only for red wines because the tannins are present only in those wines that have faced fermentation with prolonged contact with skins and seeds. For all other wines, this entry must be simply ignored. The tannins produce a sensory feature which causes the tactile sensation of astringency. To facilitate the understanding of this sensation, something similar can be caused by immature persimmon, spinach, and green fruit. It usually involves both tongue and palate. For many people, it is a pleasant sensation. For many others, it is too intrusive. If in the red wine there is a real lack of tannin, it is a deficiency, and the value to be given is 1. If the features of the red wine are overwhelmed by the astringent effect of tannins, the value to be assigned is 5. Both extreme values represent a flow.
Structure.
The structure of a wine, just like the physical description of a person, can be denoted by the adjective sturdy or slender. It indicates how full-bodied or weak a wine is. It is given by the totality of the organoleptic characteristics. In most cases, the extreme lower value could represent a flow.
Taste-smell ratio.
The proper ratio between taste and smell is the point of sensory balance of a wine. If a wine is interesting for the nose, but then very short with no aftertaste in the mouth, or vice versa, the ratio between taste and smell would not be satisfactory and the value to be assigned is 1. Conversely, if a wine is appreciated by the nose and also in the mouth, the value to be assigned is 5. It should be noted that these values do not indicate the quality but the balance between the two analyses. So, if a wine is not appreciated by the nose and also by the mouth, the score to be assigned is still 5, because the nose and the mouth are in perfect agreement. In any case, the extreme lower value represents a flow.
Final thoughts on evaluation. Evolution.
As time passes, the wine faces a continuous evolution up to the maximum point of maturity. It happens quite often that for commercial reasons or due to the inexperience of winemakers, some wines could be sold prematurely. In this case, its evolution would be minimal and the score to be assigned is 1. The 2 value identifies a young wine, 3 is for ready wines, a value of 4 indicates a mature wine, while a value of 5 indicates a wine which is too old to be considered drinkable. The 2 extreme values represent a flow.
Estimates of aging.
This entry indicates the estimate of aging that the tasted wine can last. The value to be reported is a free text field and it potentially represents the years that a specific wine could age further if stored under proper conditions. The value to be assigned requires a certain experience.
Global score.
At the end of the tasting, you should assign a global score according to all the previous values. It must not be a mathematical calculation, but you should consider the main features of the wine and express it out of 30. In the scale, 130 is the minimum score, 30/30 is the maximum score. While 18/30 is not a failure, it is the minimum score for a wine to be considered worth selecting. Normally, a wine below 10/30 should not be drunk.